So, oh, I've already got somebody on. So they can hear through. Hello, Tina, can you hear me? We're doing a test real quick. Hoping you can hear me.
Keep talking.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Welcome to Zoom land, Tina. You're our first one in. We're going to try our video too to see.
So if you can't get good
Yes,
feedback
I
from
can
them,
get perfect.
we
Look at that.
really need to know that they're hearing good audio.
Okay. So I need to hear whoever's in Zoom land, if you can hear us, and I think that's going to be a good picture, right? Oh yeah, that's
And
perfect.
you can't hear them, so they're gonna have to chat.
Chat.
to that.
Okay, got it. Got to get my chat up. Can I start? I'm former military, so I'm pretty much good on starting on time. So at least we tried. Right? Exactly right. All right. Welcome, everyone. It is right up at 6 o'clock. We want to say thank you so much for attending. You are here with the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak region. We are having our sheriff's El Paso County Sheriff Candidate Forum. This tonight is co-sponsored by the League and Citizens Project and Action 22. So thank you to our partnering organizations. We are here in the KRCC Community Room on Tejon in person, and you are also joining us virtually. So thank you so much for being here. We have I think obviously Mr. Foley is the one running for office, so we wanted to recognize anyone. I'm not sure if I have anyone online. Nope, I don't see anybody online that's elected official. And all league members, I see a few of you league members online. Thank you so much for joining us. Auto captioning. You're going to ask me questions that I have no idea how to do. Audio settings. So I've got a comment in the chat about audio settings, or please activate auto captioning, which is a great suggestion, Vicky. I just have no idea how to do it. Vicky, if you can put in, thank you so much for that. Vicky, if you can put in the chat on how I'm supposed to do that. I really have no idea. I apologize. So let me get back to where we were. Tonight is going to be a very casual conversation. You are here again, joining us in person, virtually via Zoom, or you may be listening maybe to this on our podcast. Actually, Making Democracy Work is our podcast. Dave Gardner with Studio 809 podcast is here with us, taking care of our technology and recording needs. So thank you for being here and getting this up on Making Democracy Work in the future. Why are we here tonight? So you are here specifically to hear about El Paso County Sheriff candidates. This was one of those things when we were planning, I specifically asked for this event. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We have been active locally since 1937. We do not endorse nor oppose candidates. The League's role in our community is about educating voters and defending democracy, and we want to make sure that all candidates get a chance to talk to the voters and have the ability to listen and ask questions. Tonight's discussion, again, is about the El Paso County Sheriff's race. As a former police officer's daughter in a very small town in Illinois and a veteran, I specifically requested this forum and was looking forward to speaking with both of the candidates and learning more. Both candidates were invited and both confirmed tonight's date several weeks ago. However, Mr. Roybal recently informed us of a scheduling conflict and he is unable to be with us this evening. We are working with him and his team about having a second sheriff's forum right here at KRCC where both candidates can be in attendance. So please be on the lookout for more information. We're just going to jump right in. Vicky, I'm looking for those auto captioning things. So you just go ahead and send those when you get those. I'll go ahead and take care of that. We're going to introduce Mr. Foley as one of the candidates for the sheriff here in El Paso County. In 1990, at the start of the Gulf War, he volunteered for ROTC. In 1992, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army and branched into military intelligence. And he attended airborne school. I'm not sure what the U.S. Army phrase is, if it's hoo-wah or not, but we're going to get to that. He attended airborne school and served as a paratrooper in Alaska. After September 11th, 2001, John volunteered to serve as an intelligence officer with the 5th Special Forces Group. In 2003, during Operation Iraqi Freedom, he worked as a mission planner and targeting officer for the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force West. He served with the U.S. Army Recruiting Command in New York and New England, operational oversight of 5 states, and then 12 states supervising operations, policies, and procedures. He was responsible for public affairs, marketing, advertising, and oversaw human resources, including budget, travel, and legal requirements. In 2001, again, John volunteered to return to Iraq with the 1st Cavalry Division, where he served as a military intelligence advisor with the Iraqi Army in southern Iraq. From 2012 to 2015, John was assigned to NORAD and U.S. NORTHCOM. He served as an intelligence watch officer monitoring aerospace and defense and terrorist threats to North America. He also oversaw intelligence personnel monitoring, cartels, and the Mexican drug war. In 2015, he retired and settled in Colorado Springs, and now running as a Democrat for El Paso County Sheriff on your upcoming ballot. Welcome, Mr. Foley. Thank you for being here. Your opening statement, please.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Pikes Peak League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event tonight, and especially KRCC and their wonderful facility here for hosting this. My name is John Foley. I'm your Democratic candidate running for sheriff for El Paso County. The reason I'm running for sheriff is to bring new leadership to our county department, support our current staff, recruit and retain highly qualified individuals for our force, and especially focused on community safety and deputies who are focused on community safety. Public safety is my #1 priority, and I will also establish the first oversight community board for the Sheriff's Department. As was highlighted in the intro, I am a retired Army intelligence officer with decades of experience. Thank you all for attending and for your questions tonight. I look forward to them.
Questions of our candidate this evening. We ask you to, Molly has given everyone cards to pass out, put those on the index card, get those into her, and also again, put those in the chat for me so I can monitor those as well. We're going to start with a pretty basic one. I mean, this is simple for any candidate. What are the top 3 issues you see specifically for El Paso County besides the ones that you mentioned? Public safety is obviously your #1 priority. Besides those things that you mentioned that you see, what other things are you concerned about?
A huge one is the recruiting and retention. And I'll just mention retention because the department keeps losing officers. And this is a trend that's not just with the Sheriff's Department, but with the other departments in the area, like CSPD and Fountain and some of the other departments. And it's, I think, even statewide. Then there's the issue of recruiting new officers because they're not getting new ones in as fast as they are losing officers. So there's a deficit there. So recruiting and retention is a big one. Also doing stuff like going after the drug problem that we have in this community. I know there's been a lot of talk about fentanyl. I've been to some of the forums where all the police chiefs met. I was at Doug Lamborn's forum. I thought it was an okay event. I thought they were missing certain things, which I would like to address as sheriff. The third one is really getting after helping young people understand that if law enforcement officers have approached me about really getting an initiative going of teaching young people, especially those that are in like middle school and high school, because most people enter crime or a life of crime in those age groups. And so getting a program of really educating young people about the effects of breaking the law, especially Colorado state law, And so they understand that the impact that that will have on their life, and using that as a way to do crime prevention proactively.
Kind of a different idea. Yes, sir.
Mhm.
Recruiting and retention. So I think one of our questions here is in the chat. Having lived in Black Forest, I'm well aware of the lack of deputies to cover the rural portions of the county. What are your thoughts on expanding the department?
Expanding would be great, and it's linked again to recruiting. If we can't bring our numbers up, you're not going to have the ability to, be out in the rural communities. That's a huge area of impact. That's something that when I was out at the county fair way out in Calhan, when they had the El Paso County Fair, that was a repeated thing people brought up to me, is that, hey, we have lack of coverage out in the rural areas, and they wanted that. And then I would talk about, well, we really have to bring an uptick in recruiting to bring our force back up to where it needs to be.
Speaking of retention, what is the percentage of backfill that we're missing with?
I've heard different numbers. I think 200 is what I'm tracking.
That we're missing 200 officers?
That's what
That's
I
what we
was
need to
told.
fill? Okay. Perfect. Sorry, we're taking a couple of notes up here so I can ask a few more questions. Make sure you get those into Molly for me if you have any questions, please. I'm going to kind of go from a personal perspective, coming from a small town, and I live in the city. So El Paso County is a pretty big, I travel all over the county though for work. So I just saw an article that came out today that said El Paso County was the worst county for accidents. The drivers that swerve in and out of traffic and weave in and out of traffic, specifically in the county, we are the worst one. That means more patrol officers. That means more funding. What do we do? What are your plans to solve that problem?
Well, I would say it's not strictly my problem to solve. This is, an effort with the CSPD and the other departments, obviously with the sheriff's department. There's a piece of educating people of the community of the dangers of it. And yeah, I've noticed just living here since 2012, how reckless the drivers in this community can be. That's what, I'm a big fan of red light cameras. I think they have a very good deterrent effect on that kind of driving behavior that's dangerous and can put people in harm. So, but through preventive measures like that and also education, I think are the ways to really get after it.
Again, I'm going off of your comments. Red light cameras, those are not very popular. So let's talk about red light cameras.
Rather have
And I'm going off of just, again, knowledge from what I hear, that's against my rights. You are now talking Big Brother in the instance of we don't want, that's not a very popular opinion with the people. How do you make it a popular opinion if that will help with regards to our traffic accidents and those reckless drivers?
I've seen statistics that say that it's actually not as unpopular as it's made out to be.
It's just me then. Sorry.
I lived
Sorry,
in
that was a
Maryland
personal
where
opinion. Excuse me.
they were very prevalent, and I even got caught by one time because I was being a little, much in a hurry. But that never happened again when I got ticketed with the red light camera. They work, and they've been proven to work. And again, I remember when there was I think the CSPD put out a Facebook post about the installation of one of the red light cameras, and you could just see the Facebook comments, and it was like 90% comments were positive for the red light cameras, and then you have a few of the kind of libertarian type who were all arguing about Big Brother, and they were like, but thought it was very interesting. So not a scientific poll.
Well, I'd like to see some statistics, and maybe we could follow up with something like that on how they improve the reckless drivers with regards to red light cameras. Thank you, ma'am. That would be great. I would love to see some follow-up, to also help educate our, those voters, whatever your affiliation, about why red cameras might help us. That'd be great. Thank you. What is your plan to bridge trust between current officers and the community?
Plan for bridging trust is, that's where having a civilian oversight committee would really be beneficial, because it would get the community involved with oversight and looking into the transparency of the department. Also with trust is training, improving training so that officers know how to engage the community. Good example is I was out at one of the Hispanic events a while back, and I kept getting approached by Hispanic senior citizens telling me how they were being profiled for stops by the sheriff department. I mean, we're not even talking about the stereotypical young person who's, in his lowrider and playing the music too loud. But no, these are like people in their 60s and 70s being pulled over. So if we could just work on training of how to, not do any kind of profiling of a, racial or ethnic group, and have them, trust us more by proper behavior, then that would go a long way in that regard.
Thank you, Molly. Again, make sure you put those questions in the chat. Thank you, Vicky. I'm trying to figure out your comments about the automated captioning. How would you expand diversity in the department? A question from online.
Well, expanding diversity it's really in the hiring process. I would like to see how they do their hiring procedures, because that's another area that, being on the campaign trail, I get people who stop me repeatedly who used to work in the department, and they complain about the HR department, how it's run, hiring procedures, firing procedures, things like that. And that is something like, do they have a recorded policy is the first thing. And then 2, do they actually follow their policy? Or is it just there for, not really being followed up on? And then making sure that, is there room for advancement? Because you could bring on a diverse hiring force or force that's hired, but then are they pigeonholed into certain jobs? How does advancement work within the department? And that's for both men and women.
Judging from the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol and the high number of police, law enforcement, and military people involved, retired and active, do you have any thoughts about avoiding problems within a Colorado law enforcement group?
What?
Avoiding problems and not.
As in, I would assume that those who are retired and military, those that are being convicted of the, the word escapes me, what they are convicted of. Well, they were convicted of something else. Sedition. No, it wasn't sedition either. Son of a gun. I'm sorry. I can't read the name. The word escapes me. But I think those people who were convicted or will be convicted or have been convicted, some of them I understand were active law enforcement. So
Yes.
here we have an active law enforcement person who is storming our Capitol and saying, basically, again, that we consider it an insurrection in our conversations with the league. They were basically trying to stop the
Mhm.
the transition of our government. And for us in the league as a democratic process that's in our constitution, that makes us very nervous. So I guess, again, how can our law enforcement who can storm the Capitol, and I'm assuming, I guess I'm not sure if you wrote this or not. That's how I'm reading this question. So whoever wrote this, that's kind of how. Did you participate in the January 6th insurrection as in a hiring question? So.
Make sure you don't get incredible people. How do you screen your talent?
And your talent, I was gonna say, if you don't mind, can I say something before you answer this? Because you had some experience keeping gangs and some specific
just
people
gonna go
out of the
there.
military. So please give us that.
Yes, one of the things that I had to do, and in this capacity, I had jurisdiction for a 5-state area in the Northeast of the US. And so I had to review candidates who likely or were suspected of trying to join the Army who had a gang affiliation or a hate group affiliation, to include white supremacist groups or the typical street gangs that you might associate with some of our minority population. So that is a screening process, which included going through a database through the U.S. Marshals of indicators that we looked for to try and, weed out applicants to the Army. That's what you call them, applicants, until they get to become a actual recruit in recruit training. So, yeah, that is something that's always been near and dear to me. And I've always prided myself on being able to do that role. Now, getting more, I think, what the individual asked this question for the January 6th, for those who know me and kind of know my background, I've been very involved for over a decade in highlighting the threat that groups like the Oath Keepers and the 3%ers who played a role on January 6th. I've been always talking about the threat that they pose within the military community. And I would just bring that back right over to the law enforcement community and continue my crusade against them.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the question. I'm going to take one from online real quick. Behavior calls to mind training. What kind of training does a deputy undergo?
Well, not having been a deputy myself, I don't know all the ins and outs of their training.
You
I know they
should.
have to go through their post certification, but there's a level of training just within everything from marksmanship for their firearms handling, which they do quite a bit of. But when I talk training and trying to revamp training, I'm trying to get after what is the training that will help them in the community and further engage the community in a positive manner.
Where, question from online again, where do you go to recruit officers? I'm sure from any idea where you would go that may be outside the box?
Well, when you do recruiting, there's actually two really pools. There's an internal pool, and then there's external recruiting. And this is how, the Army does it. Internal is obviously you have these, internal influences that feed into law enforcement, whether it's like those that are like, my parents were law enforcement, so I'm going to be law enforcement, or my uncle. So you have that internal. Then you get the external, and to do the external, you really have to do a market segment breakdown of why people become law enforcement. What are their driving factors? And that is not, I don't know what the driving factors are for the El Paso County deputies, but that's something that I would like to get in and break down. And then, okay, as we figure out the market segmentation for these, who we want to recruit, because if you don't have a market segmentation broken down for recruiting, you don't know where to actually apply your resources. You might be able to pull more from the military, with the amount of military bases in this community, you might be able to pull from even the defense contractor industry, which isn't always strictly military related, but it's very big in this community. And most of the people in that segment of work they come with clearances, they come with kind of all the things that would help with recruiting and hiring, as opposed to people who have baggage in their life story of, prior drug use, criminal convictions, things like that would automatically exclude them from law enforcement.
We have a couple questions on the county jail, so I'm going to kind of focus on that. Concerned that inmates at the jail were not protected during the COVID outbreak, what changes can be made to prevent illness and death for future events like that?
Well, I think the issue they ran into is lack of, was it PPE, the personal protective equipment, and just making sure that is on hand and making sure that you're doing, forward planning, something that is very near and dear to me from a military background. Being a military planner is you're preparing for crises, and then you get in things like crisis action planning, which, having been a crisis action planner, when you have a global pandemic and now you have an organization like the sheriff's department, okay, let's do some crisis action planning of what we're going to have to deal with in this process. Okay, we have a jail, we have patrols, we have deputies, and a whole bunch of things that will be fleshed out during the planning process, so that you can then take what are your critical issues and then apply your resources to them.
Just a reminder for those of you that are joining us via Zoom, it looks like we got a really good crowd in there. So thank you for joining us virtually. If you do have a question, please put that in chat. We are having difficulty hearing you on this end, so that would be really helpful. So thank you so much for being patient with us. Another question about the jail. There has been a number of deaths in the county jail recently. I would assume some of those were pandemic related kind of also, but I don't know if there have been any specific ones that were not. What can be done to keep this from happening?
Well, this has been a huge issue with the jail, and it's people who, have approached me repeatedly about, please do something about the jail, and the deaths that have occurred in there. And I don't know all the specifics because I'm not aware of like the last couple that occurred, if the coroner's ever finished a report on that. And when the news articles come out about the deaths in the jail, there tends to be a lack of follow-up on what actually caused it. But the key thing is that when you get arrested and you go into the county jail, you shouldn't die before you've even been before a judge. I mean, it's very disconcerting to a citizen in our democracy that you have people who die before even having due process. And one of my concerns is that there's there's some vocal critics of this problem, but overall in our community, there's very little outrage that I see. Like the Gazette very rarely reports about it. The other paper, the Indy, does sometimes. They do some good stories, but overall it's like, how many people have to die in the jail before it became a serious issue? I mean, I think it's up to 12 for the last, was it 2 years? I've actually lost track, but every time someone dies in jail, I get a phone call now. And I take those phone calls because concerned citizens are concerned. So
kind of two follow-up questions to what you just said then. Where, one, can I get more information on those things? If I can't get it in my local news, where can I go to get that? And a question online is, isn't the jail under contract to a civilian company for oversight?
for oversight, I'm not sure for that. I would.
Yeah, I
refer
think it
that
is.
To Sheriff Elder for that question. Once I get on board and I'm running things, then yes, I will take that question.
So can I get more details from Sheriff Elder as well then, with regards to that, or do I need to go to the coroner? With regards to deaths in the jail?
You can
Where
go
would
to
you
both
think
of
the
them.
best? Both? Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Awesome. Then we'll be following up on that to get more information for you and hopefully get
Okay.
that up on our website because I think it's kind of important and we appreciate those comments on the jail. All right, got one more here that just came in last. I'm trying to group them into categories. Can you speak to improving conditions for county inmates regarding mental health, medical needs, and most importantly, how can we care for those with intellectual disabilities in our jail system?
This is a great question because it gets after one of my big concerns, and that is having been approached by people who work there and, really couldn't handle how it was being run and, left the, sheriff's department. They voiced concern about how the percentage of people in there who have mental health issues. And I believe it's the largest mental health facility in the state of Colorado, if memory serves me right. The county jail here in El Paso County. And so it is a huge problem. Now, I know the sheriff's department will point out that, all those people who have mental health issues have committed crimes, which is why they're in there. But I think there's something to be said about how we actually cope with them. I remember one of the Republican candidates who, isn't here tonight was at a forum and he was talking about how they're in there, then they lash out, they strike a deputy or a corrections official, and then they've picked up another charge. And so they seem to be it's like perpetual motion machine there. It's just, and so really, the question is, how does the sheriff department get out of the mental health business? Which is something I would like to tackle and try and help solve as the sheriff.
That's a big question right there. So we would like to have another discussion on that because that's a whole nother topic. It really is. So thank you for that answer. Okay, so we're going to talk about some red flag laws. Explain your views on the red flag laws and how it might relate to veterans.
Yeah, red flag law. I will, I'll refrain from quoting what my opponent said, but I actually support the red flag laws. I've been campaigning on supporting actually the extreme risk protection order is what it's the full name of it. People just use red flag as a simpler, definition, but, and red flag laws, there's, was a big item in the Republican primary where all of the candidates said they would never enforce a red flag law in the county, even though when I did some research and talked to people who knew that it's already being done in the county, maybe not through the sheriff's department, but through the other law enforcement in our local area. They're using it, I think, up to 38 times, maybe 40 times now. And what's important is that law helps, like veterans who might be contemplating suicide. I mean, we know that's a huge problem in the veterans community is veteran suicide. Then you also have law enforcement. Law enforcement in the state of Colorado has done a U-turn, and now more and more of them are coming on board because they understand that it protects their officers and deputies. And we must remember in Colorado, it was law enforcement that they were the ones that pushed for that law to begin with. And then obviously think of domestic violence and all the threats to women and children from domestic abusers. That is why I'm supporting that law.
Can you give a brief explanation of what the red flag law is for our listeners, please?
It is where if someone is threat to themselves or to others, that usually law enforcement, or it could be, the party from the family could go to a judge, and the judge could issue the order to have that person at risk's firearms removed from their habitat there.
Thank you for the clarification. And you just mentioned domestic violence. I've got a couple of other questions here, but the very first article, I say article, the very first ad, one of the ads, I moved here in 2018. And at the end of the year, the El Paso County Sheriff's Department put out a listing of their most, where guns were involved with the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. The majority of those cases were domestic violence incidents where somebody died. What can we do to protect? And it's not just women and children. There are men who are a victim of domestic violence as well. What can we do to protect the community members rather than taking away the guns, because we know that that's our Second Amendment right? What are some other plans that we could do?
Well, I'm a big advocate of safe storage, because safe storage goes a long way in just keeping them out of hands, especially in the immediate, like right then and there. I mean, yeah, there are certain storage methods where you can, use a thumbprint and get a firearm out, but it's still another barrier to it. Then there's also all the programs of educating to the problems of firearm, deaths being used in a domestic violence situation, also suicide and things like that, because very often it's a kind of murder suicide pack. So that is something that needs to be, addressed. Again, I've been in lots of forums where I talk to folks, I go to all the gun shows that come to town, and as the sheriff candidate, this gun topics is like the main thing you'd expect at a gun show. And, I tell people I'm not there to take their guns away. So, so it's, yeah, I mean, in our society, we do have a lot of guns in our midst. So it's something we have to, really cope with as best we can as a society.
Do you understand extreme protection orders? I'm sorry, excuse me. Do you understand how extreme protection orders protect law enforcement officers and others in Colorado? Can you explain that for us?
Well, it's mainly going to be, I mean, like the officers have told me, it's like the number one situation where you have domestic violence and you're going to have a firearm and some angry individual who is most likely going to use it when things, start getting out of hand, and the officers are there present. If they can get it removed from the scene before it even becomes a scene, but when there's still the indicators of risk, that right there in itself will help protect officers.
Hey, John, a
We
few
got one
years ago,
online question. Do county commissioners fully fund the sheriff's department, or do they shortchange the department under the guise of having a balanced budget? And again, these are not from the league. These are from the chat. So thank you for your questions. Appreciate it.
I'll have to, like, when I get in there and like really dig into the budget to see how that's occurring. Now, for me, I understand that, I mean, my goal is to work within the budget. Whatever budget the county commissioners are going to give me, my intent is to work within that budget. If they are shortchanging me, I will, let them know and let the community know so that the community can be aware of that. But, the key thing is I have to work with the county commissioners. So they are elected officials to help run the county, and we have to have a amiable agreement to just, get things done for the betterment of the county.
Hey, John, a few years
about
ago,
working together and
a
coming
CSPD
together and
officer,
for the betterment
a
of our community.
sergeant,
So thank you for being here
while they
tonight.
were
If
protesting
you have any other
downtown,
questions, we would appreciate you
said,
putting them in chat. We are
"Just
probably going to, it is about
kill them all."
6:40, so I kind of want to be
Address racism.
respectful of everyone's time. If I've got a couple of questions up here that I'm going to kind of close off with before you give us your closing statement. Specific methods, I think we talked about this. Again, I'm kind of going back to retention and recruiting. It's kind of difficult to have a good force if you're 200 people shy of actually having a full force. Any specific methods you would use to improve retention? And the same question relative to improving recruiting. Specific methods, going back to that one?
Well, one of the things that I've looked at, which people would think pay would be a huge thing, but from the research I've done, the officers are paid enough. That's not why they're leaving. They're leaving for just being overworked. They're leaving for, maybe not being appreciated in the community, is because there is a level of tension within law enforcement where they feel they're under the gun by, elements of the community that think that, they want to be defunded or something, which is, not something that's really a thing. But, there's all these factors weighing in on law enforcement. And so many of them decided just, hey, I'll go do something else. So they leave, or they don't like how the department's being run. So they will decide to leave for that. So really don't have to worry about raising pay as an incentive. So that's kind of off the table, unless deputies give me another, pile of information to say otherwise. But really just improving what we call in the military, the command climate. I would love to get in there and do what we call a command climate survey. That's what leaders in the Army generally do. They do a survey and they determine what are the contributing factors for, deputies being, disgruntled.
Disgruntled deputies, you don't like to have them have a bad day. Last question that I got up here is, how are there steps officers could take? And whoever wrote this, when I reworded it a little bit, I wasn't quite sure of the wording. Are there steps officers could take to de-escalate a situation when apprehending a suspect, rather than, I think shooting them is, according to this, is rather than going straight for the gun? What steps could they take to de-escalate that situation?
Well, de-escalation is all going to be it's going to depend on the circumstances and what is generally, to us, I think very often we pile onto the deputies or the officers, when they go do the gun. But, in this regard, you have to understand, in El Paso County and in Colorado Springs proper, it's hard not to go with a gun, because think about it. Virtually every house in this city probably has a firearm in it. The amount of firearms in our community are just overwhelming. So I can never really fault an officer for, depending on circumstances, for shooting when you have an entire society that has guns everywhere, because you don't know when, the suspect has one or doesn't have one. Now there's plenty of other cases, like we know, like up in Denver and, Aurora, where we know there was no gun in those. And it was just, why did they go that route to deal with those people? But in Colorado Springs, I mean, the amount of shootings that occur, I really can't fault deputies for being too quick on the trigger, but it's also, it goes in the training and how they're looking, how much time, distance, and response they have based on the suspect that they are dealing with. And again, that's going to be a training thing. It's also going to be conditions of, is this daytime, nighttime? So it's a very tough question. And,
Could someone possibly address
and
my
again,
question?
I will have to side with deputies, you know, a lot of times, just because another thing they teach in the Army is for leaders to underwrite the mistakes, if they're legitimate mistakes, of your subordinates. And that is something I do want to carry over. But then I also want to make sure we're doing stuff that the community isn't getting, like, feeling further victimized by.
Well, thank you for that difficult question to end it. And we all agree that police officers have a very difficult job, and if you're elected, you will as well. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I do want to do a couple things as we close up. If you are here via Zoom, we're not done yet. We said we were here from 6 to 8. So there's going to be a little bit of an activity. We have an interactive activity for you, which we are going to use to go back to both candidates and possibly even Sheriff Elder. We're going to ask you some questions. Those of you in the room as well, you notice you've got a whiteboard over here with some markers. Your questions, the interactive activities are: one, I want to know where you live. If you just put, for instance, I live in the Mesa area, so I'm going to put Mesa. What is El Paso County Sheriff's Department doing well in your community? We want to see the positive in everything, right? So what are they doing well? Where would you like to see the El Paso County Sheriff's Department do better in your community, right? Some suggestions on how they could improve. This is also goes for you in chat. And then some specific concerns that might also be, for instance, I've got some homeless situations in my city, which I've already addressed. They go from one little place to another. I'm sure everyone has that problem when you drive around town. So, that's going to be one of mine on the list for the Sheriff's Department. Because even in my open spaces, if I'm out hiking, which I do not do, but just in case I decide to hike, I want to feel safe that I'm not going to come up on someone that, is decided that I'm in their space and feel safe. So if you guys would please take some time, again, just a few minutes to write those concerns up there. We're going to be taking some pictures and then sharing those. But thank you, Mr. Foley, for being here tonight. I want to give you just a couple minutes for a closing statement, please.
All right, thank you. I want to just thank the League of Women Voters and KRCC for tonight's event. You've always strived to make sure the people in El Paso County have an opportunity to hear from willing candidates. Being present and showing up for others has always been who I am as a person. I do this as a father, a husband, and when I was in the military, and I will always do it to provide public safety for our community. A special thanks to everyone who came tonight, so that I can listen to what is important to you. And when elected, I will set up a resident advisory committee to help keep an open line with communication with the community. Also, ballots are arriving in your mailboxes, so please continue to inquire about all the initiatives and the candidates. And I hope I have earned your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. Thank you for being here tonight. To everyone attending, thank you for attending in person, virtually, or listening to us on Making Democracy Work, our podcast. Thank you to our co-sponsors, Citizens Project and Action 22. Thank you to KRCC for having us here tonight, Studio 809 podcast, for your technical and recording expertise, and all of you for attending and being an active and engaged citizen. Be sure and check out vote411.org. That is the League's portal. If you have any questions about candidates or issues, the League of Women Voters has been doing this nonpartisan candidate information through Vote 411 since 2006. LWVPPR.org has got our upcoming events. Please get involved and join us. Our ballot discussion is on Saturday, October 15th. From 1 to 3 p.m. at the Penrose Library in the Columbine Room. So we hope you'll join us for that. Thank you so much. Make sure you put those comments in the chat, and I'll continue to keep up Zoom just in case you have any other questions, but would love to hear your what you would like to see in the El Paso County Sheriff's Department rather than just your questions for the candidates. So we would appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. I'm going to keep reporting on that. Thank you, everybody, for attending on Zoom. I've got a couple of questions that we're going to go ahead and save this chat. Vicky, I never did find out. Hold on. Let's see, where are you? Vicky, I never did find out the enable thing, so I apologize for that. I am not in Zoom's portal or their actual app. I'm on a Chrome, so I apologize. I have no idea how to do that enable thing, but I will definitely learn before our next one. So thank you so much for adding that. But I will definitely figure out how to enable auto captioning for our next one. So thank you for the comments. Again, please make sure that you're putting those. We've got a couple on the board right now. There's some are combined call system. Oh, that's a good one. And training officers in mental health, intellectual disability response. So again, we really would like to know what would be better in your community. If it means more patrols and on things with regards to meth labs, or again, those with intellectual disabilities and handling those response times. Another one might be better response times. You might be in an area in the county that has piss poor response times. So would love to hear about those things. And we'll continue to keep the chat open and the Zoom so you can add those too. But thank you, everybody, for participating.
Okay, so you're not spinning on my mics
I'm
anymore?
off. I've already, you told, I put the built-in mic. That's what I was supposed to select, right?
Yep.
Yeah, then I think I'm good. I'm pretty
I
sure.
just
I
didn't
am.
want to prematurely turn you off.
Nope, you're good. I am done.
Okay. Sheriff's Department.
We have other things to do. don't we?
I like this.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
That's really about as far as you can go.
Because I'm gonna leave it then. I don't know if that comes out or does that unscrew or
It just
just
pulls
pulled
out.
out.
Yeah.
Nice. Sweet.
Yeah.